How's it going, everybody? The Seer here, and today I'm excited to give you a video about the Nightstalkers team. Now, this is the newest team that came to Marvel Strike Force, and it's actually a combination of two teams that got combined together. The first one was the Nightstalkers. They had a single issue run back in 1992, which was the Rise of the Midnight Suns, and that's the second group that we're going to be discussing today. Now, I know we had a lot of teams that came to the game that had the Midnight Suns kind of theme to it, such as the Supernatural and the Dark Hunters. However, due to the copyrights of trying to get the name, that's why they had to not use that name, and they decided to use the Nightstalkers, which I'm perfectly fine with. It's just another take that Marvel Strike Force has to kind of adapt and meld as their own uniqueness to them. Now, what is this team? So this is a pretty complex team to where they have to deal with a lot of moral gray areas and complexities. They dive deep into the horror aspect and the supernatural aspect in the comics as well. Now, they do have their own uniqueness to them, the Nightstalkers and the Midnight Suns itself, but overall, they do battle against the Dark Forces, which the first group that they formed was to face off against Lilith. So we're going to dive deep into this, and hopefully you guys do enjoy this video. The Nightstalkers debuted in Nightstalkers issue 1 back in 1992. And this was that single issue run where it was the Rise of the Midnight Suns that I mentioned previously. Now, they quickly made a name for themselves as specialists in hunting vampires. Most notably, they were deeply connected to the legacy of Dracula himself. The original team was made up of Blade, who's that legendary vampire hunter, the Daywalker that everybody knows. There's Hannibal King, who's a vampire detective who refuses to feed on humans. And then there's Frank Drake. Now, Frank Drake is a direct descendant of Dracula, and that's the key connection that was brought together for the team's story. Drake's bloodline meant that he was tied to the very creature that they hunted and added personal stakes to the battle. Blade, who's arguably the most famous member of the team, he brings a unique set of skills to the Nightstalkers. Born as Eric Brooks, Blade was born as a half-human, half-vampire after his mother was attacked by a vampire while she was pregnant with him. This gave Blade all of the strengths, such as enhanced strength, agility, heightened senses, and he didn't have any of the usual weaknesses that vampires get, such as weakness to sunlight. Now, Blade made it his life's mission to hunt and eradicate vampires. Driven by a desire for vengeance after his mother's death, his expertise in vampire lore combined with the martial arts skill and his proficiency with an array of weapons designed specifically to take down vampires, like his signature silver sword and stakes. This made him one of the most feared vampire hunters in the Marvel Universe. Blade's approach to vampire hunting set the tone for the Nightstalkers as a whole. He was willing to go to extreme lengths to take down creatures like Dracula, often operating in more gray areas to achieve his goals. The team was brought together by Doctor Strange, who foresaw a resurgence of vampiric threats, including the possible return of Dracula. He needed a team capable of dealing with such powerful and dangerous adversaries. The Nightstalkers didn't just fight random vampires. They were up against some of the most ancient and most powerful figures in vampiric lore, often tackling the kinds of horrors and monsters that other Marvel heroes wouldn't even touch. Unlike traditional superhero teams, the Nightstalkers operated in the shadows, taking on threats that often went unnoticed to the public or other heroes. Their missions were dark and gritty. They focused on the horrors of the supernatural world, particularly vampires like Dracula. Blade, the most iconic member, led the team with deadly efficiency, using his enhanced vampiric powers to hunt the creatures of the night, including Dracula, who's been his nemesis in many of the Marvel stories. The Nightstalkers were unique because their battles weren't just external. They also were deeply personal. Frank Drake's lineage tied directly to the monsters that they fought, while Hannibal King constantly struggled to hold on to his humanity. Blade's relentless pursuit of vengeance against Dracula and vampires made their stories more complex and more filled with moral conflict. This wasn't just about hunting monsters, it was about facing their own inner demons, legacies, and responsibilities to stop vampire resurgence that could threaten humanity. While the Nightstalkers focused on vampire hunting, the Midnight Suns cast a much wider net. They battled the supernatural forces that threatened the entire world. They also debuted back in Ghost Rider issue 28 back in 1992. This was during that Rise of the Midnight Suns crossover event, and this is one of Marvel's first supernatural team-ups. The original team was brought together by Ghost Rider, and at this time, it was Daniel Ketch that held the mantle of the Ghost Rider. Together with his brother Johnny Blaze, they formed the core of this new supernatural alliance. The Midnight Suns were formed in response to the rise of Lilith, a powerful demoness and the mother of demons. Lilith sought to unleash her monstrous children, the Lilin, to take over the world. Seeing the immense threat that Lilith possessed, Doctor Strange foresaw that it would take more than just one or two heroes to stop her. He orchestrated the creation of the Midnight Suns, united various supernatural figures who specialized in fighting occult, demonic, and mystical threats. The team's roster expanded quickly, including heroes like Morbius, the living vampire, Johnny Blaze, now wielding Hellfire-powered shotguns, the Daywalker Blade, and Doctor Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme. One of the team's defining characteristics was the moral complexity. They weren't the shiny, morally upright heroes you'd find on other teams. Many of the Midnight Suns had dark pasts and were battling their own inner demons. Morbius, for instance, was a vampire torn between his need for blood and the desire to be a hero. Ghost Rider was bound to the spirit of vengeance, often grasping with how much control he has over his own actions. Even Blade, who brought his vampire hunting expertise, had a ruthless, almost cold-blooded approach to killing monsters. The Midnight Sun stories also explored the gray areas of good and evil. They often had to fight fire with fire, sometimes aligning themselves with questionable figures or using dangerous magic to save the world. This blurred morality was central to the dynamic. Unlike the Avengers or Fantastic Four, the Midnight Suns had to make tough, often morally ambiguous decisions to stop these supernatural threats. The stories delve deeper into the darker side of heroism with a strong emphasis on horror, mystical lore, and personal sacrifice. Over the years, Midnight Suns' roster fluctuated, with characters like Werewolf by Night, Elsa Bloodstone, and even Moon Knight joining the ranks. Each brought their own abilities to the table, whether it was Moon Knight's expertise dealing with ancient Egyptian gods or Elsa's expertise in hunting monsters. No matter the lineup, the team always found itself at the forefront of battles against evil forces that transcended the physical world, from dimensions of hell to the twisted planes of dark magic. Though the Midnight Suns were not always active, their influence on Marvel's supernatural storytelling has been undeniable. They set the stage for how Marvel handles the large-scale mystical threats, often bridging the gap between street-level horror and cosmic-level magic. The Midnight Suns proved that the supernatural side of Marvel could hold its own against the mainstream superhero fare, offering fans a darker, more complex corner of the Marvel Universe to explore. So how does this team fit in with Marvel Strike Force? The Nightstalkers team consists of Blade, Man-Thing, Agatha Harkness, Moon Knight, and Karen Page. This team is heavily inspired by the Midnight Suns, focusing on that supernatural and magical threats, while also retaining some of the vampire hunting elements that the original Nightstalkers team had. Now, we already did discuss how Blade joined, but what about Moon Knight? So Moon Knight is a servant of Khonshu. He often faces that ancient cults, undead enemies, the occult dangers that aligned with the kind of supernatural conflicts that the Midnight Suns handled. As far as Man-Thing, he joined the Midnight Suns not only because of his connection to the Nexus, but also due to his role as the guardian of the mystical fabric of the universe. His inclusion provides the team with access to the realms beyond the physical world, and allows them to face threats across the other dimensions. In some iterations of the team, he's not even an active fighter, he's more of a mystical anchor. His existence is tied to maintaining the balance between the dimensions, which is crucial when facing those demonic and cosmic level threats. As far as Agatha Harkness, she's one of the most powerful witches in Marvel Universe. Her role in the Midnight Suns makes perfect sense because the team focuses on that supernatural abilities. Agatha's expertise is invaluable as well when it comes to navigating curses, hexes, and that ancient dark forces, which are central to many of the Midnight Suns enemies. As an added bonus, the Darkhold has been a major storyline within the Midnight Suns. For Karen Page, she now goes by Oath in the game. She was a player-voted character, and she was bit by a vampire. Man-Thing found her and contacted Morbius, who ended up becoming that mentor to her to help control that vampirism. By tying the connection with Morbius and Blade, you can see how the themes of horror, the magic, the occult all blend together, to form a team that's both a nod at the past and is the evolution to the modern audiences that play this game or read the stories. As far as reading recommendations I can give you, check out the Rise of the Midnight Suns. That's the 6-issue crossover event that happened within the Ghost Rider and Spirit of Vengeance. There's also going to be the Tomb of Dracula. Check out issue 10 especially, because that's the first appearance of Blade. If you're curious about his origins and everything, definitely check that one out. As far as something more recent, they're doing the Midnight Suns Blood Hunt event right now, where it's basically the return of all of the original Midnight Suns characters. So check that one out, because I'm going to be checking that one out myself. Let's go ahead and see how we want to build this team and focus on which characters to really boost up and level. We're going to start with the 2 reworked characters first. The first one being Moon Knight. Now, Moon Knight is the first character that we would end up subbing out. He has a 105 speed, and there's too much RNG into his kit. So if you want to save your resources, you can pass on building him up. And if you have a Mephisto character or Odin, you can definitely sub them in for those raids. Now, in regards to the T4s, he really doesn't have anything that's essential. His basic would be a luxury build. His special would be a high value, is how I would place that, due to the rebound chain going to that 6 to 7 adjacent targets. Now, his ultimate ability is a high value. That's mainly due to the 80 to 100% extra damage, and that's his turn 1 ability, which can be devastating. It also ends up having it to where if there's 3 or more Nightstalkers, it clears all positive effects as opposed to 3. So I do place it as a high value if you do end up building up Moon Knight. Now, for his passive, I do label this one as a value to high value range. That's because it adds 20% extra max health to him. When they did the rework to his stats, they made sure to factor that T4 in of that 20% extra health. So that is kind of impactful if you do end up building him. Now, as far as the ISO selection goes, I do have him listed as a Raider. That's mainly due to Blade's passive Awaken ability. If you don't end up getting that, you could definitely use him as a Striker, because he does a fairly good amount of damage, and the chance to get those negative effects on the ISO hit is pretty impactful as well. Now, in regards to Agatha, I have her basic listed more as a luxury value, so kind of a underneath the value pick. The main reason for that is she does piercing damage. So the 65 extra percent piercing is pretty impactful. That would put her at 275% piercing damage on that primary target. So you don't need it, but if you had the extra T4s, you're not going to regret it because she does hit very hard. As far as the special goes, I have this one listed as a value as well. Having the 60% piercing to the primary and the secondary attacks, again, she hits very hard. So anytime you can get that extra damage out there, it's going to be a pretty good pick. The ultimate I have listed as a high value. This is going to be doing pretty good damage, as we noticed in game already. And the fact that it's going to add 20% extra of the character's max health as barrier, and putting the stun on the Hero Mystic Brawler and Hero Mystic Controller, does put it as a very high pick for me. Now, for Agatha's passive, I do have that listed as an essential pick. It's going to get 25% extra drain. This combined with Blade's passive is going to give 55% drain to the entire team, which is very meaningful. As far as the ISO selection goes for her, I have her listed as a Raider. The amount of damage that she does, and she doesn't really need that skirmisher to get the focus up on her anymore, so Raider has been working fantastic for me. Next, we're going to end up going into Blade's kit. Now, all of his abilities do have the awakened abilities, so we're going to take a look at those as well. This basic I have listed as a extremely high value. I'm not going to say it's essential, but it is very close to essential. It's going to give that extra hit for the basic attack, making it to where there's going to be the double tap for the reduced speed bar. Now, if you do end up getting the awakened ability on him, that's going to give the 20% extra crit damage. I have that listed as the lowest value for his awakened abilities. Next up, we're going to look at the special for him. I have this one listed as a high value. It's going to end up doing extra damage, and it's going to put slow on all secondary targets as well, which is meaningful, but it's not really essential. If we end up looking at the awakened ability, this is going to end up clearing all negative effects from the self, and clear 1 negative effect for your allies. I have that listed as a high value as well. Next up is going to be his ultimate ability. I have this listed as a high value, mainly because it's going to do a 20% health steal from the primary and redistribute to himself, which is going to bypass heal block. Now, the reason I don't have this listed higher is mainly because it doesn't really change how his kit plays out, especially for the team. Doing a 20% health steal is very good though. Now, if we end up looking at the Awakened ability, this is going to end up applying blind for 2 turns to the primary and secondary. I have that listed as an extremely high value. For his passive ability, I have this listed as an extremely high value pick. On a successful attack by this character, it's going to clear defense up and apply defense down for each attack target, which is very good. I don't see that as an essential though. Now, if we end up looking at the Awakened ability for the passive, that is going to be essential if you can get it. On itself or ally crit, on the following ally turn, gain assist now, which is very impactful and changes the entire kit of the entire team. That is definitely an essential to me. It's also going to give plus 10% crit chance for self and all allies. So it's going to be boosting the crit chance too. Now for his ISO, I absolutely have that set as a striker. The main reason for that is if you hit into a vulnerable target, especially with these assists coming in, that's going to end up doing triple taps, which is a 30% turn meter rewind. So even though Raider looks good, Striker is going to be very impactful and pretty much game changing for this entire team. Next up, we're going to look at Oath. For Oath's basic, I do have that listed as an essential. The reason for that is because in raids, it always applies the exposed mechanic. And what the exposed does for this team is on any character or Nightstalker ally's turn, at the end of that turn, it's going to do 200% piercing damage to them and reduce the duration of all positive effects by 1. That does include Safeguard, which is very impactful and game changing. Now for Oath's special, I do have it listed as a high value. The reason for that is because it's going to apply ability block for 2 turns, and it's going to apply heal block to the primary and adjacent targets. So it gives this team a lot of control by putting that 2-turn ability block on opponents, along with the heal block, which you kind of need in the raids because of how much healing the enemy teams do get. Now for the ultimate ability, I do have this listed as an essential. In raids, it's going to apply the additional bleeds and trauma to the primary target. Also, it's going to apply 3 bleeds and trauma to all other enemies. Having trauma get peppered across the entire enemy field is definitely an essential T4. Now for Oath's passive, I have this listed as an essential as well. This is everywhere. On spawn, on offense, fills speed bar by 5% for self and all allies. That's really all you need to know about that. If you see that it's affecting the speed bar and it's everywhere, that's definitely a T4. The added benefit is it's going to do an extra 40% piercing damage to the injured enemy with exposed. So instead of 200% piercing, it's 240% piercing. So having it to where you can get those pings out there and that speed, it's definitely essential. As far as the ISO for Oath, I do have her listed as a Raider. I feel that with the new stats that came out, she really doesn't need the focus boost from Skirmisher to really play into the focus resist checks. Having her as a Raider to really feed into the blade, getting those assists once you get that awakened passive, I feel is going to be more impactful for this team. As far as Man-Thing, I do have his basic listed as a value. Instead of gaining 1 regeneration, it's going to gain 2 regeneration. So it's going to be a little bit more of a survivability for him. For Man-Thing's special, I do have that listed as a high value. What this will end up doing is actually change the way the kit plays out for the special. If the enemy ends up having slow, it's also going to apply stun to that target. So I do have it as a high value. I don't see it as essential, but being a high value to extremely high value range, I definitely find that there. Now the ultimate is definitely going to be an essential T4. This is going to apply Safeguard for 2 turns in raids. So right off the bat, when you see Safeguard, it's going to be an essential T4. The added benefit to this T4 is going to have it to where it clears 2 negative effects from self and all Nightstalker allies. And one of the most impactful T4s on the entire team is going to end up being Man-Thing's passive. So this is definitely an essential T4. it's going to make it to where this team gains an additional 15% speed from 5%. So once you get this T4 on him, he's going to make it to where the team has 20% extra speed stat, not turn meter, not speed up. It's a speed stat of 20%. So that is absolutely a must to get this team running properly. Now, as far as ISOs go for Man-Thing, I'm actually going to use him as a fortifier. That's going to give him a lot more survivability with the barrier on him. And also while he has barrier, he's going to get that additional drain. So that's going to get 55% drain from the Nightstalker team, plus the additional drain from the ISO itself. Now, if you want, you can definitely use him as a raider. That way you really play into Blade's passive Awakened to where every time there's a crit, there's going to be the assist, and there's going to be more vulnerables out on the field for Blade to hit into. Now, as far as the build priority of this team goes, I would definitely list it as Blade, Oath, Agatha, Man-Thing, Moon Knight. Moon Knight's going to be the first one that gets pulled off of the team in raids or in war, just because of how slow he is and the RNG to his kit. Having a big Blade and Oath is definitely going to be impactful. Agatha being farmable already and able to get those diamonds on her, really ramping up the damage, you will notice it and you will enjoy it. Man-Thing, you want him big enough basically because he's that pre-taunt on spawn. When he comes in, he's going to have the taunt. If he ends up dropping below 50% health, he's going to clear that taunt. So keeping the taunt on Man-Thing is going to be valuable. So definitely manage your resources in that way. Where can you actually use this team? This team is more than a raid team. This is a top 5, arguably top 3 team in the game right now for what they can do. The speed advantage that they have allows them to really take out many of the threats on defense in Alliance War. So I'm going to keep mine on offense. On defense, you're able to throw certain teams at it that's not as valuable, such as the New Avengers, Underworld. A-Force does fairly well against it. The full Illuminati with Captain Britain as well. So I'm going to be keeping mine on the offensive side of thing to really take out some big threats. For Cosmic Crucible, we do have that new season, and they're going to be a pretty big pain, especially in the raid room. There's other rooms that they can really take advantage of in Cosmic Crucible, or you can keep them as offensive weapon. They can take out quite a bit of teams in Cosmic Crucible as well, I believe. As far as the next team I'm going to be focusing on in this type of video series, I'm going to be doing the Undying team, which is going to focus on the What If and the What If Zombies storyline for the Marvel Zombies. So please stay tuned for that one. I'm hoping to have that one done on Halloween as a little treat for you guys. If you do end up enjoying this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up, share, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, have a wonderful rest of the day.